Hi, I want to take a quick moment to just highlight a tool in Excel that you could use if you're trying to calculate the probabilities associated with project completion and you're trying to figure out, for example, if I know that my calculated time for a project is 20 weeks, I might want to know what's the probability that we would finish the project in 15 weeks, right? So uh, that requires us to calculate some z-scores, and sometimes if we look at the example that's found in your textbook, we have a project that's scheduled to be completed in 15 weeks, and the standard deviation of the project, which is the square root of your project variance, is given here as 1.76 weeks. Okay, so usually a first step for us to be able to figure out any probabilities of, say, finishing this project in 10 weeks would be for us to calculate our z-score. Okay, so a z-score usually requires us to figure out what's the due date that you're interested in targeting versus what's the project expected date of completion. Okay, so from the data that we have here, we expect to complete our project in 15 weeks, but I might be interested in figuring out what's the probability that I'll finish this project in 16 weeks rather than in 15 weeks. Okay, so using the z-score approach, I'll subtract the expected date of completion from the due date, divide that by our standard deviation for the project, and come up with a z-score. In this case, the z-score is going to be a 0.57. Okay, now I'm going to use this z-score of 0.57, go into the z-score table and figure out what's the probability associated with that 0.57. Okay, now, rather than doing that, and the reason for making this very brief video is to show you how can you go ahead and do this in Excel. Okay, so Excel has a function that's called, let me type it here, norm.dist. Okay, the norm.dist asks you to input information related to this project, and it'll help you calculate the probability of finishing a project in a given amount of time. Okay, so the X here is what's that due date that you're expecting to complete the project in, and say I wanted to finish my project in, I wanted to figure out what's the probability of finishing this project in 17 weeks, given that we've estimated that the project is going to be completed in 15 weeks. And it'll ask you what's your standard deviation, and our project standard deviation here was 1.76. And I'm going to, for the last part, I'm going to say, let's just type a 1. Okay, we're going to be using what's called a cumulative distribution function here and see what it gives us here. Okay, so it gives us a value which, if I change it to a percentage, it tells us that the probability of finishing this project in 17 weeks, given that we've budgeted for 15 weeks, is 87%. Okay, so does that look right? I think it does. If we expect to finish the project in 15 weeks, then adding extra time means we'll definitely be able to finish the project. Okay, so the larger this value becomes, the higher the probability that we will actually finish the project within a given time frame. So if I want to know what's the probability of us finishing this project in 20 weeks, within 20 weeks. Okay, so there's almost 100% chance that if we expected to finish the project in 15 weeks with a project standard deviation of 1.76, there's a very high chance we're going to finish this project within 20 weeks. Okay, but the flip side to that is, what if we knew that the project's supposed to take 15 weeks, and I'm trying to figure out, will you be able to finish this project in 10 weeks instead? Okay, so in this case here, given the some standard deviation, let me increase some zeros here, there's a very low probability that we'll finish this project in 10 weeks if we'd budgeted for 15 weeks. Okay, so that's a quick tool that you can use to see what's the probability of finishing the project in 15 weeks rather than 15 weeks. It's low, but better than 10 weeks. Okay, so again, just so you know, the function that you're looking at in Excel is called the norm.dist function, and it'll ask you what's your target value what's the average value, what's your project estimated time, and then what's your project standard deviation. Okay, that's all I wanted to share.